We appreciate you being with us. There is really so much to talk about, especially impeachment, considering Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, he wants to wait until February to start the impeachment trial. What do you want?
Well, I think whatever timing is chosen, we need to make sure that we are able to do several things at the same time. Joe Biden has put forth a slate of nominees to fill his cabinet, and it's crucial that we work on confirmations so that he can set up his administration. You know, the administration was very hollowed out in the waning days of the Trump administration with people resigning and leaving. We need a functioning federal government to respond to the multiple crises we face as a nation.
Well, what I've been hearing a lot is, Congress saying we can walk and chew gum at the same time. But as we know in government, that doesn't always happen. So how confident are you that the Senate could pull off this impeachment trial while doing all these other things while the country is facing many issues?
Well, it's going to require cooperation. And it's something that we have a constitutional duty to proceed with. Timing can be negotiated, and I believe we can put together a timetable that allows us to both work on confirmations so that President Biden can set up his administration, as well as proceed with an impeachment for inciting a violent insurrection against our democracy, the Capitol, and the Congress.
Safe to say you'll vote to convict, right?
I will see the trial through. That will always be the case. But I'm very familiar with the article of impeachment that's been passed by the House of Representatives and what it contains.
Well, Wisconsin's Republican Senator Ron Johnson, he was tweeting about the impeachment trial of the president who would be out of office then. And he said it's unconstitutional to have this for a private citizen. You have a law degree. So what do you think? Is this unconstitutional?
It is not unconstitutional. And I will remind viewers that not only is it an article of impeachment, but it references the 14th Amendment, third clause, which basically would say that anyone who incites an insurrection is not eligible to run for office again or hold office again in the future. And that is still a very, very live issue that doesn't get erased because that former President Trump has left office.
Have you talked to your Republican colleagues in the Senate? Do you think there's any chance of drumming up those 17 votes to get a conviction?
I certainly have heard any number of my Republican colleagues talk about their openness to hearing the case and expressing very grave concerns about what we all went through together on January 6th, where many of my colleagues narrowly missed direct confrontation with insurrectionists who clearly intended to do harm to members of Congress in order to overturn the election and the will of the people.
I think the other major topic right now is the vaccine. And you've been critical of the federal vaccine rollout. And, with the Biden administration, they haven't been tested on this yet. So I think it's easy for a Democrat to say they'll do such a better job. But one thing that Wisconsin is complaining about right now is not getting doses from the federal government. How confident are you that this will change, and how quickly?
Well, first of all, in the greater context of fighting this pandemic, I've been critical of the Trump administration since almost the beginning of the pandemic. There has been utter failure to really stand up and use the tools available to help protect the people of the United States, whether that was unleashing the full potential of the Defense Production Act, getting testing supplies and test kits and reagents to where they were needed, failing to get the PPE that our frontline healthcare workers needed. And the vaccine rollout seems to follow that same pattern. Now that President Biden is in office and is getting about the task of unleashing the full potential of the Defense Production Act, I think that we will see a lot more assistance provided to the local levels to get this done. And I do think we'll see dramatic changes because of that.
How soon, though, could that happen? Realistically, how soon do you think Wisconsin could get more vaccine?
Well, certainly it will help when we have an administration that is set up working with the president. And so that's why the confirmation of his nominees is critical to this. But I do think that we will see fairly quick turnaround, especially in terms of the delivery of vaccines, especially because those are coming from the pharmaceutical companies producing the vaccines at the direction of the federal government and doesn't rely on necessarily governmental logistics in order to get them to where they need to be.
The president put out a $1.9 trillion COVID relief package. As you know, some Republicans are already very critical on this. How long do you think this will take to hash it out?
Well, first, I'm hopeful that we will work together to get the job done. Every member of the United States Senate has constituents who are struggling, who are suffering, who are falling ill, and who face issues like eviction or mortgage foreclosure. And so it's important that we work together to relieve those crises in each of our states. But we will try as hard as we can to work swiftly and get the bipartisan support the bill will need. If not, we know that the method that can be used is called budget reconciliation, and that will be hopefully a last resort because I do hope that we can work together.
Well, there is a slim majority in the Senate, 50-50. You know, Vice President Harris is now the tiebreaker. Do you think the president will be able to get legislation through, especially, I mean, I'm guessing a progressive like you will push him on a few things?
There's no question that when we face such big crises that we need bold action. And again, we hope that everybody recognizes how big our crises are and how bold our actions must be. But again, if we need to, the budget reconciliation process does furnish us with a way to move forward with a simple majority. And we will take that up if we need to. But hopefully we can see some bipartisan cooperation. As the president said in his inaugural message, we're all in this together. This is about us working together, and we need unity now. Well,
you wrote a letter to the president asking him to expand Buy American.
Yes.
How would that help Wisconsinites specifically?
Well, let's first start with the pandemic itself. Look how critical things became because we were reliant on other countries for so much of what we needed, whether those were test kits and reagents and swabs that were manufactured in other countries that we needed urgently, or PPE like the N95 masks, which are made predominantly in places like China. And it was a global pandemic. The demand was up worldwide. And because we couldn't quickly start manufacturing this on our own, we weren't able to meet the needs early on, putting many people's lives at risk, and we lost way too many. We should never find ourselves in the position of not being able to meet our own basic national security needs, whether those are to fight a pandemic or to keep us safe as a nation. And I think that Buy America is a way for us to make sure that we can always fend for ourselves and protect our people. And I also believe that when tax dollars are being spent, they ought to support U.S. workers and U.S. jobs and U.S. products.
Well, in saying that, though, I should ask you, because Wisconsin Republican Congressman Fitzgerald, Style, and Grothman, they're upset about President Biden canceling the Keystone XL pipeline, saying that it will hurt Wisconsin jobs and Wisconsin workers. So in light of what you're saying, what's your opinion on that?
Well, first thing, we know that when Donald Trump took action, he promised that the products used would be American, and we learned they weren't. But that aside, just yesterday, or just earlier this past week, I had the nominee for transportation secretary before our Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee. And we talked about that issue. He was questioned by a number of people. And what's really clear is that Joe Biden's jobs agenda, and especially where it concerns energy and environment, will create far more jobs than may be lost if this pipeline is canceled.
All right. Senator Baldwin, as always, thank you for your time.
Thank you.